Now, Barbara Hewson is a leading human rights barrister. She recently found herself at the centre of controversy after she wrote an article criticising Operation Yewtree, the post-Savile police investigation into allegations of sexual abuse, under which Jimmy Tarbuck, Dave Lee Travis and Jim Davidson were all arrested. In the piece for an online magazine, she claimed the post-Savile witch hunting of ageing celebs echoes the Soviet Union. She said the crimes committed by the TV presenter Stuart Hall, who was jailed for 15 months for sexual assault, were misdemeanours, nothing like serious crime, and ordinarily would not be prosecuted, dubbing it a grotesque spectacle. And to avoid the persecution of old men, she proposed 3 changes to the law: that we should remove complainant anonymity, introduce a strict statute of limitations, and reduce the age of consent to 13. Well, her article, as you might expect, provoked an angry backlash. The Sun concluded a damning editorial: "Ms. Hewson, you should be ashamed." The Sunday Times described lowering the age of consent as just mad, a rapist's charter, and the NSPCC described the proposals as outdated and simply ill-informed. To hear them from a highly experienced barrister simply beggars belief. Well, Barbara Hewson is with me now for her first interview. You began this article saying, "I do not support the persecution of old men." So you wouldn't have gone after Jimmy Savile if he was still alive?
Well, it depends what he's alleged to have done.
Well, we know what he's alleged to have done. It's a variety of sexual crimes. I mean,
including satanic ritual abuse.
You find it funny?
I do.
Which bit?
Satanic ritual abuse doesn't exist. It's like alien abduction.
So are you saying that the people who've made these allegations are just making it up?
I would think so.
Everything?
I mean,
we're talking about hundreds of people here who've made sexual allegations against Jimmy Savile.
But that's not evidence.
No, they're allegations. That's what I'm saying. So, are you saying you just don't believe them?
What I'm saying is that it's pointless to conduct an investigation of this kind into someone who's dead, because they can't answer. Now, whether he's guilty of doing things, and I'm sure there were a lot of people at that time who did a lot of things that they shouldn't have been doing, but you can't actually do anything effective if the person you're accusing is dead, because he's not around to be questioned, he's not around to be charged, he's not around to defend himself in any way. Now, I'm convinced that what's been going on with all these other guys who are being investigated, and I want to be careful not to say anything that will compromise any ongoing prosecutions, but I'm convinced that this is really a kind of displacement activity because Jimmy Savile is not around to answer for all the things that he's said to have done. And so what you get is almost, if you like, a demand for retribution against other people.
But Stuart Hall pleaded guilty.
I know.
So why are you saying he shouldn't have been prosecuted?
Well, I don't think he would have been prosecuted if these things had been raised at the time, you see, because, for example, some of the alleged things that he pleaded guilty to, like putting a hand up a skirt, I don't think in the 1960s that kind of thing would have been prosecuted. Now, where I think the police
it was wrong, wasn't it?
It may have been wrong, but I don't think it would have been prosecuted at the time.
But why is that a reason not to prosecute now? Just because people were not very enlightened in the 1960s?
Because I think there are huge difficulties with evidence when you're prosecuting very old historic crimes. For example, if you were told that you had done something between, say, January 1967, and July 1968, how would you know all those years later?
That's a slightly different objection. I mean, you're basically. I mean, your article said touching a 17-year-old's breast, kissing a 13-year-old, or putting one's hand up a 16-year-old's skirt are not remotely comparable.
They're not remotely comparable to the Ealing Vicarage gang rape
and murder,
and the Fording Bridge gang rape and murder. And the point is an important one because crime falls into a spectrum. Some crime is extremely serious. Rape is a felony. It's always been defined as a felony in law. In the Sexual Offences Act, which applied to Stuart Hall, rape is defined as a felony. Indecent assault, which is what he was charged with, was deemed a misdemeanour. So my description of it as a misdemeanour was legally accurate, although people got upset by it.
Quite offensive, though, isn't it?
No, it was the legally accurate description. An indecent assault under the Sexual Offences Act 1956 was technically in law a misdemeanour as opposed to the felony crime of rape.
But that is loyally language that is pretty provocative when you're talking about...
Why should legal accuracy be provocative?
Because you're talking about victims who feel very hurt, very abused, and for whom this was a major breakthrough in their lives, something that has freed them from years and years of torment.
But it still doesn't change the law.
And by describing it as a misdemeanour, which may be legally correct...
It is legally correct.
You are belittling it.
No, I'm not. I'm simply saying what the law is. How can that be belittling it?
Well, because you're also saying these things shouldn't be prosecuted.
Well, I don't agree with historic prosecutions, and equally, I mean, I don't agree with the idea that you should, for example, prosecute people for war crimes that happened in the 1940s, because I think it is simply too late. I'm very strongly of the view that if something has happened to someone which is wrong, I'm very strongly of the view that they should raise it and complain about it as soon as they can, because that enables a proper investigation to take place, and it would also prevent, arguably, the repetition of future offences, which is why it's important to report these things.
I mean, these are
promptly.
pretty astonishing claims. So you're saying a war criminal in the 1940s shouldn't be prosecuted. So if Adolf Hitler was alive today, you wouldn't put him in court if he was found somewhere. If Jimmy Savile was alive today, you wouldn't attempt a prosecution. I mean, people will find these claims pretty eccentric.
Well, no, because in America you have statutes of limitations for criminal offences, so it is actually quite normal for there to be a cut-off point beyond which you cannot charge people. So, you know, and America is, I think most people would agree, a reasonably civilised country.
Now, what about your suggestion on the age of consent, reducing it to 13? I mean, what is your thinking on that? Is it that people are being accused of paedophilia who aren't paedophiles in your view?
My thinking on that was that the age of consent was raised, as you will see when you read the article, the age of consent was raised from 13 to 16 in 1885 following a huge moral panic, which led to the Criminal Law Amendment Act, which incidentally criminalised male homosexuality. And what it did was react to a newspaper scandal about the Victorian sex trade, which greatly exaggerated the role of underage prostitution. So it was a knee-jerk reaction to an outcry caused by a newspaper. And one of the reasons why I wrote my piece for Spite was that I'm fascinated by the parallels between the Victorian moral panic of the 1880s and what we're seeing now, which is this media obsession with sex crime and with underage sex. And it all comes together in the Savile case. And it was all coming together in the Victorian times when the law was changed.
But do you not see how lowering the age of consent...
No, my point was that if you take the view that the age of consent was raised in response to a moral panic in the 1880s, we've stripped away the gay sex criminalisation bit of that act. If you strip away the other bit, which is to say the age of consent gets back down to where it was, then you've got the law back to where it was before the moral panic arose. Now, I'm not advocating either rape or compulsory sex, yeah? I'm just simply saying that I think the age of consent in this country at the moment is too high.
And you don't see how that could be abused?
Well, rape is rape, whatever age you are.
Barbara Hewson, very controversial views. I'm sure we'll have a big reaction to them. Perhaps we'll get you back and ask you to answer them.
That would be great.
Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you.